Have you ever wondered how a country rich in resources can slide into economic turmoil? Picture this, a nation blessed with vast resources, a land abundant with minerals, fertile soils, and a favorable climate. This is Zimbabwe, a country that on paper should be an economic powerhouse. Yet, the reality paints a vastly different picture. Zimbabwe, despite its potential for economic prosperity, has been through a tumultuous journey. The country's tale is a paradox, a contradiction of what one would expect from such a resource-rich nation. Instead of economic growth and stability, Zimbabwe has been marred by economic decline and instability. This story isn't simply about economic downturns and mismanagement. No, it's a chronicle of how an economy that held so much promise could unravel so dramatically. It's a tale of missed opportunities and lessons that can be learned by economies around the world. Now, buckle up as we journey through Zimbabwe's economic roller coaster ride. Zimbabwe's economic tale begins in 1980, with the dawn of independence. Like a newborn, the nation held boundless potential in its hands and the world watched with bated breath. The soil was rich, the climate favorable, and Zimbabwe's agricultural sector was poised to become the breadbasket of Africa. At independence, Zimbabwe was a beacon of hope on the African continent. Its economy, although underdeveloped, was not without promise. With an agricultural sector that accounted for approximately 20% of the nation's GDP and employed over 60% of the labor force, Zimbabwe was a fertile ground for economic growth. The early 1980s marked a period of optimism. The government embarked on a series of economic policies aimed at fostering growth and reducing inequality. Land reform programs were launched with the noble intention of redistributing land to the landless majority. The government also invested heavily in social sectors, particularly in education and health. However, beneath this veneer of progress, all was not well. The economic policies, although well-intentioned, were flawed in their execution. The land reform program, for instance, was marred by corruption and mismanagement. The redistribution of land often disregarded the need for agricultural expertise and adequate support systems, leading to a decline in agricultural productivity. Moreover, the heavy investments in social sectors led to ballooning government expenditure. This, coupled with a decline in agricultural output, set the stage for economic instability. The government began to borrow heavily, both domestically and internationally, plunging the country into a cycle of debt. While the world saw a nation striving to uplift its people, economists observed a precarious balancing act. The government was spending more than it was earning, and the agricultural sector, once the backbone of the economy, was starting to crumble. So, as the sun set on the 1980s, Zimbabwe found itself on a precarious economic path. The nation that once held so much promise was teetering on the brink of economic decline. Little did anyone know the seeds of economic catastrophe were being sown. In the late 1990s, Zimbabwe embarked on a controversial land reform program, a turning point perhaps? As Zimbabwe teetered on the brink of a new millennium, it also teetered on the brink of an economic precipice. The controversial land reform program was an attempt to address historical imbalances in land ownership. However, the program's implementation was fraught with challenges and it had far-reaching implications for the agricultural sector. Agriculture, the backbone of Zimbabwe's economy, was thrown into disarray. This policy intended to redistribute land primarily from white farmers to black citizens. However, it was implemented in a hasty and chaotic manner, leading to a decline in agricultural productivity. Skilled farmers were displaced without a clear plan for who would take over the operations of these farms. The result? A sharp decline in agricultural output. This had a knock-on effect on the economy, with a significant drop in export earnings, a vital source of foreign currency for the country. The land reform program also had significant implications for agriculture-related industries. The decline in agricultural output meant that industries such as agro-processing were also severely affected. The ripple effect was felt across the economy, leading to job losses and an increase in poverty levels. But this was not just about economics. The land reform program also had social and political dimensions. The displacement of farmers and the ensuing economic hardship stirred social unrest. Politically, it led to international isolation and sanctions, further exacerbating the country's economic woes. It's worth noting that while the intention to correct historical injustices was laudable, the execution of the land reform program left much to be desired. The lack of planning, the hasty implementation, and the disregard for the potential economic consequences were indicative of a government that was out of touch with the realities of running an economy. The land reform program was just the tip of the iceberg. It set in motion a sequence of events that would lead to one of the most severe economic crises of the 21st century. The story of Zimbabwe's economy is a cautionary tale for nations worldwide about the dangers of economic mismanagement. Fast forward to 2008, Zimbabwe entered the world record books, but for all the wrong reasons. Imagine a time when a loaf of bread costs a few $1,000,000 one day, but the next it costs several billion. This was the reality for the people of Zimbabwe in 2008, a time marked by unprecedented hyperinflation. Hyperinflation is when the monthly inflation rate reaches a staggering 50% or more. In Zimbabwe, it was so severe that it's difficult to put into words. At its peak, the inflation rate was an unimaginable 230 million% per month. It's like watching the value of your money evaporate right before your eyes. Now you might be wondering, how did things get this far? The answer lies in the government's poor fiscal policies. The government started printing money to pay its debts, a move that is akin to pouring gasoline on a fire. With more money chasing the same amount of goods, prices skyrocketed, leading to the hyperinflation we're discussing. This economic collapse had a profound impact on the population's living standards. Life savings became worthless overnight. The price of basic goods and services soared beyond reach. It was a time when people had to carry bags of money just to buy a loaf of bread. Furthermore, the hyperinflation led to a breakdown in trust in the Zimbabwean government and its currency. People began to resort to barter trade or foreign currencies for transactions, further devaluing the Zimbabwean dollar. But the government's missteps weren't limited to reckless money printing. There was also a lack of fiscal discipline, corruption, and the mismanagement of the country's resources. All these factors combined to create an economic storm that Zimbabwe is still trying to recover from. So what can we learn from Zimbabwe's hyperinflation episode? It's a stark reminder of the devastating effects of poor fiscal policy and economic mismanagement. It underscores the importance of responsible governance and economic stability. Zimbabwe had hit rock bottom, or so it seemed. Post-2008, Zimbabwe's economy has been on a roller coaster with a few ups and many downs. As the dust settled from a period of hyperinflation, the nation found itself in a state of economic limbo. The Zimbabwean dollar, once a symbol of national pride, was worthless. In a bid to stabilize the situation, the government adopted the US dollar in 2009. It was a desperate measure, but it seemed to work, at least temporarily. The US dollar brought a semblance of stability, and for a while things seemed to improve, but the underlying issues remained unresolved. The economy was still fundamentally weak, riddled with corruption and plagued by poor governance. The use of the US dollar was just a band-aid solution, masking the symptoms but failing to address the root cause. In 2019, a decade after adopting the US dollar, Zimbabwe reintroduced its own currency. But it was too little, too late. The new Zimbabwean dollar failed to inspire confidence and the economy spiraled once again into chaos. So what lessons can we learn from Zimbabwe's economic downfall? Firstly, sound economic policies are crucial. Policies should be designed to foster growth, not just to fix immediate problems. Secondly, corruption and poor governance can be catastrophic. They can undermine even the strongest economies, and rebuilding trust is a slow and difficult process. Lastly, and perhaps most importantly, we learn that the value of a currency is not just about numbers and exchange rates. It's about trust. It's about the faith people have in their government to manage the economy effectively. When that trust is lost, it's incredibly hard to regain. Zimbabwe's journey is a cautionary tale. It's a story of what can happen when economic policies are mismanaged, when corruption is rampant, and when trust in the government is eroded. Zimbabwe's economic tale is a stark reminder of how not to run an economy. We've journeyed through Zimbabwe's economic roller coaster ride, but what have we learned? At its core, Zimbabwe's economic tale is a cautionary story. It speaks of the dangers of poor economic management, unfettered printing of money leading to hyperinflation, and the resulting economic collapse. Remember the economic hope Zimbabwe once held, being referred to as the breadbasket of Africa. This hope was squandered with a series of ill-judged economic policies leading to an economic tipping point. The unchecked printing of money to pay off debts led to hyperinflation, with prices doubling every 24 hours at its peak. This economic collapse resulted in widespread poverty and suffering, and the aftermath is still being felt today. The lessons learned? Sound economic policies are crucial for a country's prosperity, and their absence can lead to devastating effects. As we reflect on Zimbabwe's economic tale, let us remember the importance of sound economic policies and the devastating effects of their absence.